Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for November 9th through 15th. This week I read 2 books, I watched 2 shows, I watched 3 movies, and I listened to 3 books. First this week I finished the Houseguest and Other Stories. This is a short story collection out of Mexico, I believe it was. And this collection had about 10 or so short stories, all of them with kind of a creepy vibe. One of the biggest themes I remember running through most of these stories, probably not all of them, but most of them, is women expressing something and men just being like, whatever, I think you're wrong, or just completely disregarding, or the men in them being kind of terrible. However, there was at least one story where the perspective was a man, and that one was particularly interesting because it starts out with him thinking he sees himself, and then following himself to try to figure out if he's the original or if that one's the original. And that gives you an idea of how weird these stories are. Ultimately, I did enjoy this collection. Next I read Ready When You Are, which is the North American title for The Boy from the Mish. Honestly, I find it really annoying when publishers give something a different name in a different hemisphere, because sometimes people will talk about the original book and I'll realize I can't get it here and I'll be bummed as to why, but then I realize I can get it here, it's just called something different. This one is all about an Aboriginal boy growing up in the Mish, and this one takes place over the Christmas holidays, so it's the height of summer, it's super hot, his cousins have come to visit, and then with his aunt and his cousins have come this other boy. So suddenly he's sharing his bedroom with this guy he doesn't know who freshly just got out of juvie. He also should be going back to school for his final year, but he's decided that he doesn't want to go, much to the chagrin of his mother, who's like, look, when I was your age, we were basically told we had to get out of school by age 16 because we had to work, but that's not the case for you, so if you could just finish your education, that would be great. He also has a girlfriend, but that isn't going really well. Anytime they try to become intimate with each other, it just doesn't happen, and he keeps blaming it on the fact that he's had one too many beer. But upon the breakdown of that relationship, he might be looking in different avenues, which he doesn't really want to because that's not widely accepted where he lives. If you can't figure it out, this is a coming-of-age queer story, and I very much enjoyed it. On to the shows I watched this week, the first one being Happy Valley. I watched both the 2nd series and the 3rd series, and this show was thought out from the beginning to have this very big gap between the 2nd series and the 3rd series. I knew going into this there had to be some kind of wide gap in between series, because I saw this show started in either the mid-2000s or the early 2010s, and then didn't finish until the early 2020s. And I went, if it's only 3 series, why did it take them that long? And it turns out it was planned that way from the beginning, which is just so cool. Between the 2nd series and the 3rd series, there's actually a 6 or 7 year gap. I can actually tell you it's 6 years because we know that Ryan turns 10 in the 2nd series, and we know he turns 16 in the 3rd series. What's also amazing about all this is all of the same actors came back for their roles, including the one playing the youngest boy, who was such a pivotal role and the actual reason why this series had to be so much later than the 2nd series. There's this amount of emotional depth, but also this character needs to have some form of agency that he just wouldn't have if they continued on the series from where it was into this plot line, and I thought that was absolutely brilliant. Especially because this kid actor kind of went away, went to school, wasn't really acting anymore, and actually apparently was very nervous to come back because he was like, oh no, what if you've waited all this time and I just muck it up and I forgot how to act. Needless to say, I thought this was done really, really well. I thought the whole vision of this show was done really, really well, and I think you should watch it if you have access to it. The other show I watched was the series finale of Taskmaster season 20. As always, this is really fun. I never really know what to tell you besides I watched it and it was a good time. There was definitely one task in particular that everybody in this episode seemed to very much enjoy, so I really enjoyed seeing them take out those frustrations and do this silly thing, because ultimately that's also fun. Also in this finale, everybody was dressed as a pirate for some reason, and I love that they didn't bother explaining that. I thought it was fun. As for the movies I watched, while I was up island visiting family, we watched The Lost Bus, which is based on a true story. What happened during the 2018 California fires. This guy is really down on his luck. He's moved back to his hometown because his father was ill, although he hadn't really talked to his father in a very long time. His mother is still ill, his father passed away, and his son is with him, and there's kind of a divorce situation between him and his son's mother. And he's trying really hard to work these jobs, he's not getting enough shifts, he's got all these things to pay for, he has to put his dog down, which is just like super sad. And then one day while he's at work, there is a fire, and he's like, okay, well that's not great, I want to get back to my son who has called me to say that he's sick, but I have to do all these other things. And he gets this last minute call saying there's all these kids at this one elementary school and they need to be taken to a different place so their parents parents can pick them up because they're in the evacuation zone, and he's the closest bus, so he decides to do it, and things go terribly awry. The lead is played by Matthew McConaughey, who did a great job. America Ferrera plays this teacher that has to also be on the bus with him with all of these kids. And it was just such a harrowing, stressful circumstance. Where I was watching this as well, there was a fireplace right behind me, so I actually had to like take off my sweater, and I was kind of feeling some of the warmth that these characters were feeling. Not to the extent they were feeling it, because they got very close to like the middle of fire situations, but it definitely increased the interesting atmosphere situation. While folks were at the house for a couple of hours, I decided to watch Salem's Lot, which weirdly enough I never got around to reading as a kid. I read a lot of King as a kid, but I never got around to reading this one. I didn't even know what it was about, but the synopsis thing on the screen spoiled for me because this is a tale about vampires. Even without that, I think with the intro of this, I pretty much would have understood that, because it very much echoes the introduction bits, or at least certain bits from Dracula, which I assume King did on purpose. So I'm sure had I not been spoiled with the synopsis, which I don't usually read, I would have gotten it pretty quickly. This one is about a writer who's returned to his hometown to get some inspiration for a book that he's writing, and then he and other people seem to notice that people are dying at a higher rate than usual, and also weird things are going on. There were definitely some inventive things that happened in this, and ultimately I really enjoyed it. The final movie I watched this week was last night with my roommates, and that was Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, which funnily enough was a book that I tried to read back in the day when it was first published, and I thought to myself, nope, even when you add zombies to this, it doesn't make Pride and Prejudice a book for me. Which I know is going to blow some of your minds, I'm so sorry. But ultimately, it's one of those books you have to read for school, which automatically means my interest in it is just much lower than it would be otherwise. This is a movie that I have to assume they knew was going to be ridiculous going into it, because there's certain things that kept happening that were played up for comedic effect and ridiculousness, and Lily James's bosom heaving the whole damn movie must have been on purpose. But this also had a really fun cast, and I feel like Matt Smith must have had a really fun time in this one. As for the books I listened to this week, the first one was I'm Afraid of Men. This is a very short audiobook, and it's a very short book if you read it in print. It's only about an hour long if you're reading as an audiobook. And this is a collection of essays why this trans woman is afraid of men. But then also at the very end, we also get to see why she's afraid of women. I've read things by this author before, and I really enjoy seeing her point of view because obviously it differs from my own. The second book I listened to this week is The Lamb. This one is an interesting perspective because our main character is a 6-year-old girl. She kind of grows up during this. But I believe when we meet her, she starts out about at the age 6, and then she gets up into be 12 or 13 maybe. She gets to the point where she definitely has her period, so maybe she's a little bit younger, I can't remember exactly. But she lives in the forest with her mother, and her mother likes to do this thing where she takes in strays, kills them, and they eat them. That's their primary food source. She goes to such lengths as leaving broken glass and nails on the road so people get flat tires, and then they come to their house looking for help, and then they don't get help, they get dead. And this is just normal to our protagonist because she's grown up with this situation. And there kind of came a point where I theorized as to what the title of this book had to do with this situation, and I was not wrong. I don't know why books about cannibalism have become so popular recently, but this is definitely one of those books. And it just makes me even happier that I don't eat meat, and I haven't for over a decade. The last book I listened to this week is The Third Gilmore Girl by Kelly Bishop. This is her memoir, and she is so much more badass than I knew about her because I knew that she played Emily Gilmore, like I knew her in that role, but she's also done so many other things that I was just simply unaware of. For example, she originated and was the inspiration for the role of Sheila in A Chorus Line, which is a musical that I definitely know because I had a musical theater teacher who was also in a later production of A Chorus Line, and he actually taught us the original choreography to the last number of the show, 1. Can I remember that choreography? No, I learned it over 20 years ago. But as she's talking about the formulation of this show and she hasn't dropped the name yet, I'm just going, oh my goodness, I know exactly what show this is, and that song just started playing in my head. She has had such a truly amazing, iconic, and legendary life, and she has worked with some very big names, and something as a side tangent that has nothing to do with her life, I did not know, and I don't know if you know, so I'm gonna let you know, that Joel Grey is Jennifer Grey's dad. For whatever reason, I had never put those two together because people can have the same last name and not be related to each other, but I learned that tangentially in this book. Seeing her in the role as Emily Gilmore, I had no idea that she was a chorus girl. She grew up dancing. She had this hard upbringing that turned into at the ballet from a chorus line, for which she won a Tony. This was just fantastic. You should absolutely listen to this book or read this book. She reads it herself, so listening to it is a great idea if that's available to you. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!